In today's video we are going to take a deep dive in the book Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. The book is divided into 6 parts, and we will go through them continuously. The novel tells the story of Rodion Raskolnikov, a young man who commits a murder and is then tormented by guilt as he tries to evade detection and punishment.
The first part of Crime and Punishment is titled Preliminary Talks, and it introduces the main character, Rodion Raskolnikov, a poor and struggling student in St. Petersburg, Russia. Raskolnikov is deeply in debt and has been living in a cramped, airless room for some time. He is conflicted and tormented by various personal and philosophical issues. The first part introduces several other characters, including Semyon Zakharovich Marmeladov, a drunken and destitute clerk who is a friend of Raskolnikov's, and Marmeladov's daughter, Sonia, who works as a prostitute to support her family. Raskolnikov becomes very fond of Sonia, even though he is disgusted by her profession. We also see Raskolnikov's relationship with his mother and sister, who are concerned about his welfare and try to persuade him to return home to them in the countryside. However, Raskolnikov is resistant to their pleas and remains in the city, preoccupied with his own thoughts and problems. Continuing, we see Raskolnikov struggling with his own thoughts and feelings as he tries to make sense of his life and the world around him. He is deeply troubled by his poverty and his inability to find a way out of his financial difficulties. He is also struggling with his own sense of purpose and meaning, and he becomes increasingly isolated and alienated from the people around him. One of the main themes of the first part is the contrast between Raskolnikov's intellectual and philosophical ideas and the harsh realities of life in St. Petersburg. Raskolnikov is deeply influenced by the ideas of the Enlightenment and believes that he is entitled to transcend moral laws and conventions to achieve his own goals. However, he is also deeply troubled by the suffering and poverty he sees all around him, and he becomes increasingly conflicted about his own beliefs and actions. Towards the end of the first part, we see Raskolnikov's mental state begin to deteriorate as he becomes more and more obsessed with his own thoughts and ideas. He becomes increasingly isolated and disconnected from the world around him, and he begins to behave erratically and irrationally. In Crime and Punishment, the main character Raskolnikov murders an elderly pawnbroker and her sister. He murders the pawnbroker, whose name is Alyona Ivanovna. Unfortunately, the pawnbroker's sister is also present during the murder, and Raskolnikov also takes her life. Raskolnikov's motives for killing the pawnbroker's sister, whose name is Lizaveta Ivanovna, are less clear. It is suggested that he killed her by accident when she stumbled upon him during the murder of her sister, or that he killed her in order to eliminate a witness. The second part of Crime and Punishment is titled On Crime, and it begins with Raskolnikov's arrest and interrogation by the police. Raskolnikov is accused of murdering an elderly pawnbroker and her sister, and he is shocked and confused by the accusations. Despite his initial protests of innocence, Raskolnikov eventually confesses to the murders and is taken into custody. We also see Raskolnikov's interactions with the police and his fellow prisoners, and we learn more about his motives for committing the murders. Raskolnikov reveals that he killed the pawnbroker and her sister because he believed that they were worthless and that their deaths would not matter in the grand scheme of things. He also believed that by killing them, he could prove his own superiority and attain a higher level of consciousness. The second part also introduces the character of Svidrigailov, a wealthy and mysterious man who appears to have some connection to the murders. Svidrigailov is initially presented as a possible suspect in the murders, but it is later revealed that he had nothing to do with them. Instead, Svidrigailov becomes a kind of mentor and confidant for Raskolnikov, offering him advice and guidance as he struggles to come to terms with his own guilt and shame. Continuing, we see Raskolnikov's relationship with Sonia deepen as he turns to her for spiritual and emotional support. Sonia, who has always been deeply religious, helps Raskolnikov to see the error of his ways and to understand the true nature of his crimes. She encourages him to confess and to accept punishment for his actions, and she helps him to find peace and redemption. We also see Raskolnikov's relationship with Svidrigailov come to a dramatic conclusion, as Svidrigailov confesses to a series of crimes and reveals that he is planning to kill himself. Raskolnikov is shocked and saddened by this revelation, and he tries to persuade Svidrigailov to change his mind and seek redemption. However, Svidrigailov ultimately decides to go through with this plan and takes his own life. The second part also features the trial and sentencing of Raskolnikov, as he is found guilty of the murders and sentenced to hard labor in Siberia. Despite the harshness of his punishment, Raskolnikov can find some sense of peace and acceptance as he comes to terms with the consequences of his actions. The third part of Crime and Punishment is titled Recollections, and it begins with Raskolnikov's arrival in Siberia, where he is to serve his sentence of hard labor. The third part follows Raskolnikov as he adjusts to life in prison and begins to come to terms with his own guilt and wrongdoing. One of the main themes in the third part is the contrast between Raskolnikov's intellectual and philosophical ideas and the harsh realities of life in prison. Raskolnikov is initially resistant to the idea of confessing and seeking forgiveness, and he remains convinced that he is somehow superior to the other prisoners. However, as he begins to interact with his fellow prisoners and witnesses their struggles and suffering, Raskolnikov begins to understand the true nature of his crimes and to feel remorse for what he has done. The third part also sees the return of Sonia, who has followed Raskolnikov to Siberia to be with him and to offer him spiritual and emotional support. Sonia's presence helps Raskolnikov to find some sense of peace and redemption, and he begins to see the value of confessing and seeking forgiveness for his actions. Raskolnikov's relationship with Sonia deepens as they begin to plan a future together. Despite the challenges and hardships they face, Raskolnikov and Sonia find solace and hope in each other's love and support. We also see Raskolnikov's relationships with other characters continue to evolve, as he begins to make amends for his past mistakes and to seek forgiveness from those he has wronged. Raskolnikov reaches out to his mother and sister, and he begins to repair his relationship with them. He also makes peace with Semyon Zakharovich Marmeladov, the drunken clerk who was a friend of Raskolnikov's and whose death had deeply affected him. The third part also sees the resolution of some of the other subplots and conflicts in the novel, as the characters come to understand and accept each other's flaws and weaknesses. Overall, the second half of the third part is characterized by a sense of growth and redemption, as Raskolnikov and the other characters learn to forgive themselves and each other and to move forward with hope for the future. The fourth part of Crime and Punishment is titled The Preliminary Investigation, and it picks up the story several years after Raskolnikov's arrival in Siberia. Raskolnikov has served most of his sentence and has been released from prison, and he returns to St. Petersburg to start a new life. The fourth part follows Raskolnikov as he tries to reintegrate into society and to put his past behind him. He is aided in this endeavor by Sonia, who has remained by his side throughout his imprisonment and who helps him to find a job and a place to live. One of the main themes of the fourth part is the struggle to find a sense of purpose and meaning in life. Raskolnikov is still struggling with his own guilt and self-doubt, and he is struggling to find a way to move forward and to make amends for his past mistakes. However, he is also determined to make a fresh start and to build a new life for himself, and he works hard to overcome the challenges and obstacles that stand in his way. The fourth part also sees the return of some of the other characters from earlier in the novel, including Porfiry Petrovich, the police investigator who was responsible for Raskolnikov's arrest and imprisonment. Porfiry Petrovich is now a changed man, and he offers Raskolnikov his support and friendship as he tries to make a new start. Raskolnikov's relationships with Sonia and his family continue to deepen and strengthen. Raskolnikov and Sonia are now married, and they are working together to build a new life for themselves. Raskolnikov's relationship with his mother and sister has also improved, and he is able to be a source of support and guidance for them. However, the fourth part is not without its challenges and setbacks. Raskolnikov becomes embroiled in a legal dispute over the inheritance of a large sum of money, and he is forced to confront his own feelings of jealousy and resentment. He also becomes involved in a confrontation with Svidrigailov's son, who is seeking revenge for his father's death. Despite these challenges, Raskolnikov is able to find strength and resilience in his relationships with Sonia and his family, and he is able to overcome the obstacles that stand in his way. By the end of the fourth part, Raskolnikov has achieved a sense of peace and acceptance, and he is able to look towards the future with hope and optimism. The fifth part of Crime and Punishment is titled In the House of the Unfortunate, and it follows Raskolnikov as he visits Marmeladov and reflects on their past relationship and the events that have led up to Marmeladov's death. Raskolnikov is deeply moved by Marmeladov's suffering and regret, and he is reminded of his own mistakes and shortcomings. One of the main of the fifth part is the idea of forgiveness and redemption. Marmeladov, who is near death, seeks Raskolnikov's forgiveness for his own past mistakes and asks for his help in making amends to his family. Raskolnikov is deeply touched by Marmeladov's request and is moved to tears, and he realizes that he too must seek forgiveness for his own crimes and make amends to those he has wronged. The fifth part also introduces the character of Lise, Marmeladov's daughter, who is present at her father's deathbed. Lise is a young and impressionable girl, and she becomes a kind of confidant and mentor for Raskolnikov as he tries to come to terms with his own guilt and remorse. Raskolnikov continued to reflect on the events of his past and to seek redemption for his crimes. He becomes increasingly determined to confess and to make amends to those he has wronged, and he begins to prepare for his own arrest and imprisonment. The fifth part also sees the resolution of several of the subplots and conflicts that have been running throughout the novel. Raskolnikov's legal dispute over the inheritance of a large sum of money is resolved, and he is able to find a sense of peace and acceptance with regards to this matter. He also confronts Svidrigailev's son and can find a way to reconcile with him and to make amends for his father's death. Overall, the fifth part is characterized by a sense of growth and redemption, as Raskolnikov comes to understand the true nature of his crimes and to seek forgiveness and redemption for them. By the end of the fifth part, Raskolnikov is at peace with himself and the world around him, and he is able to look towards the future with hope and optimism. The sixth and final part of Crime and Punishment is titled Epilogue, and it picks up the story several years after the events of the previous parts. Raskolnikov has served his sentence and has been released from prison, and he is now living in exile in a remote village in Siberia. The sixth part follows Raskolnikov as he adjusts to life in exile and begins to make a new start for himself. He is aided in this endeavor by Sonia. Raskolnikov is also able to rebuild his relationships with his mother and sister, and he becomes a source of support and guidance for them. One of the main themes of the sixth part is the idea of atonement and redemption. Raskolnikov has accepted his punishment and has made amends for his crimes, and he is now working to make a positive contribution to society and to help those in need. He is able to find a sense of purpose and meaning in this work, and he is able to find peace and contentment in his new life. The first half of the sixth part also sees the return of some of the other characters from earlier in the novel, including Porfiry Petrovich, who has since retired and is now living in the same village as Raskolnikov. Porfiry Petrovich offers Raskolnikov his support and friendship as he tries to make a new start, and the two men are able to reconcile and move forward together. Raskolnikov's relationship with Sonia continued to thrive, as they work together to build a new life in exile. Raskolnikov is also able to maintain his relationships with his mother and sister, and he becomes a source of support and guidance for them. The sixth part also sees the resolution of the main conflict of the novel, as Raskolnikov is able to find a sense of peace and acceptance with regards to his past crimes and to move forward with hope and optimism. He is able to put the events of the past behind him and to focus on the present and the future, and he is able to find happiness and contentment in his new life. Overall, the sixth part is characterized by a sense of growth and redemption, as Raskolnikov comes to understand the true nature of his crimes and to seek forgiveness and redemption for them. By the end of the novel, Raskolnikov has achieved a sense of peace and acceptance, and he is able to look towards the future with hope and optimism.
We highly recommend you read the book because it contains important and relevant information about crime and its punishments. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like. If you want to see more of our content, please subscribe and click the bell to receive daily reminders of our posts. If there is a book or a topic you want us to cover, please drop it down in the comments and we'll make sure to cover the top comment during the next week.